And let's come together to celebrate and amplify the force of Nari Shakti. Please welcome on stage Minister for Women, Child Development and Minority Affairs, Smriti Irani.
Women are indeed reaching commanding heights, ladies and gentlemen, just like the Border Roads Organization's all-woman squad at India's highest post, higher than the Everest Base Camp. The BRTF 755 is situated at Hanle at an altitude of 15,000 feet. This 5-officer unit, led by Combat Engineer Colonel Ponung Doming, is the world's first all-women team to be deployed at an extremely high altitude.
And the team of engineers led by Colonel Doming is supervising road construction along the line of actual control with China in the sensitive and strategically important Eastern Ladakh sector. The road is helping us guard our borders better and realize the growing aspirations of India. Kyunki banega to badega India.
Without further ado, TV9 Networks and Nishant and Neha are already there. Over to you.
सबसे पहले तो मैं चाहूंगा जोरदार तालियों से स्मृति जी का स्वागत करें. हमारे लिए समय निकाला आपने. बहुत बहुत स्वागत है मैम. थैंक यू वेरी मच. नेहा.
Well, this is a guest who needs absolutely no introduction. She is an icon in this country. Union Minister for Women and Child Development and Minority Affairs, and if I may add, the giant killer of 2019. Okay. Let me ask the Minister this question. Since we are discussing today Nari Shakti and driving Mission Viksit Bharat, you know, the Prime Minister is a major votary of Nari Shakti and it's very close to your heart as well. He took a very progressive step of inducting, correct me if I'm wrong, 11 women in his Council of Ministers. One of them is in the highly coveted Cabinet Committee on Security. But unfortunately, we do not see this level of women's participation at the state level. You will agree that if India has to take the next giant global leap, we need to unlock women's power. How do we do that?
I think you do a great disservice to women when you presume that power is only if you're in a constitutional position. India has made an economic and a political case for why women need to be shoulder to shoulder with men or any other gender. The topic of conversation on your platform is what India thinks today. In fact, what India does today, the world does tomorrow. And what India has done significantly for gender is make a case for women who are emancipated across all walks of life. So if you presume that Prime Minister Modi's gender agenda or female agenda is only limited to how many colleagues he can have in the Council of Ministers, you do disservice to his entire effort, not only as Prime Minister, but his entire life's journey as an administrator. Now, I've had the greatest of privileges to see him function as the Chief Minister of Gujarat and as the Prime Minister of India. What did he do in Gujarat, which now finds resonance across India? He's one of the first people in the Office of Chief Minister who ensured that there is a digital interface with citizens across all districts. He then ensured that there was a digital interface where medical infrastructure in a district, along with medical infrastructure right up to the level of panchayat, combined efforts to look after women and children, and especially their health. There was something called e-Mamta, which he did as the Chief Minister of Gujarat, where from the day a woman registers herself to give birth, to ensuring that she is encouraged to deliver the child in a medical institution and not birth at home. That is something he started 2 decades ago. Now, what happens when you encourage pregnant women to deliver in a medical institution? You curb the death of the mother at childbirth and the death of the child if the child is born with some medical complications. Now, many people presume that Prime Minister Modi at the national front is now doing projects like Pradhan Mantri Matra Vandana Yojana, wherein 3.5 crore women have had cash transfers into their bank accounts up to the level of 6,000 rupees, only so that the day they take leave to go and see a doctor is compensated. Now imagine the detail to which he went, so that if women who are economically active want to look after their health, they should be compensated and institutional delivery should be promoted even at the national level. So what he did in the state today finds national success. Now, why am I giving this context, Neha? what happens, who gets counted? The world over, only women in institutional leadership positions get counted, as though only their success matters. What Prime Minister Modi has done is ensure women at every walk of life, in every platform, are counted. Now, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, he started something called Mission Mangalam, where he ensured that self-help groups in Gujarat had a business plan, had institutional credit, and serviced that credit so that their capacity financially could grow. Today, when I see that out of 90 million self-help groups, you have women in those self-help groups who receive nothing less than 8 lakh crore rupees from the government of India. But if you compute their economic value in the Indian ecosystem of economy, you will see that they do business worth $37 billion every year. Shouldn't those women count? So when Prime Minister Modi says that these 90 million women in self-help groups matter, there are many who've still not done the math of the rural economy impact that these women have. Now imagine this, for the first time we have a Prime Minister who says that these women have capacity to become lakpatis. The nomenclature itself is not gendered. It favors a man. It's a lakpati. So he talks about financial ambition. Women were always spoken about from an aspirational and emancipation point of view, as though they are waiting to be rescued. What Prime Minister Modi has done is make them equal partners in your economy. So I know that people who introduced this segment spoke about a lady who is leading road building efforts in the Indian Armed Forces at the line of actual control. But you also have not heard the story of, for the first time, Prime Minister Modi ensuring that the labor code allows companies to hire women for underground mining. So those are the stories that need to be told, because these women at leadership positions in underground mining, in space technology, matter. So yes, what the women in the Council of Ministers is just a political reflection, but the reality of what Prime Minister Modi has managed to do at the grassroots is enormous, and that's why I'm hopeful that what Prime Minister Modi in India has done today, the world should do tomorrow. And I say this because we have created that platform even during India's presidency at the G20. I'm sorry I'm taking so long, but I wanted to give context.
आप जो बता रही हैं इस बात से हम पूरी तरह सहमत हैं। कल ही प्रधानमंत्री जी ने मन की बात में वो बताया था किस तरीके से गांव के ग्रासरूट लेवल पर महिलाओं को ड्रोन उड़ाना सिखाया गया, और वो ड्रोन दीदी का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है वो अपने आप में एक शायद दुनिया अब आगे जाके करेगी जिसका जिक्र आप कर रही हैं। मैम, आप पिछले महीने मदीना होकर आई और आपकी सरकार में एक सबसे अनप्रेसिडेंटेड चीज़ें ये हुई कि महिलाएं अकेले जाने लग गईं और उनकी संख्या भी 4000 के ऊपर। अब जो देखने वाली बात है, जब आप ऐसी जगह जाती हैं जहां पर अभी भी बहुत पाबंदियां हैं, वहां पर भारत का ये जो रिसर्जेंस है इसको कैसे देखा जाता है?
देखिए, मेरा मदीना में या फिर हज की तैयारियां कैसे हों इसके संदर्भ में उस देश में जाना, प्रधानमंत्री मोदी की स्वीकार्यता जो इस्लामिक नेशंस में है उसका सबसे बड़ा एक मुझे लगता है प्रतिबिंब है। ये सत्य है कि महिला बिना महरम के अब जा सकती हैं हज के लिए। वो इसलिए भी क्योंकि धर्म में ये अनुमति थी, धर्म में ये पाबंदी नहीं थी। और प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी ने जब इस निर्णय को करा तब उन्हें ये ज्ञात था कि जब धर्म पाबंदी नहीं देता तो प्रशासन क्यों पाबंदी और रोड़ा बने। उन्होंने व्यवस्थाएं कुछ ऐसी की। ये 4000 महिलाओं का जाना अपने आप में अद्भुत क्यों है? क्योंकि व्यवस्थाएं बन जाती हैं, लेकिन व्यवस्थाओं का इस्तेमाल जब तक विश्वास ना हो तब तक नहीं किया जाता। तो ये 4300 महिलाएं थी जो अकेले हज के लिए गईं। उनका वहाँ जाना इस विश्वास को भी दर्शाता है कि आज हिंदुस्तानी चाहे विश्व के किसी भी कोने में क्यों ना हो, वो जानता है कि अगर मुसीबत सरहद पार भी आई तो मोदी है तो मुमकिन है तुम घर लौटोगे ही लौटोगे।
Very powerful indeed, and there is no doubt, ma'am, that the government has taken very many progressive measures with regard to women, whether it is 6 months maternity leave or even passing of the women's reservation bill that happened recently. But may I ask you a personal question? Because at the start I said, you are an icon, a role model for many around this country. Your personal journey has been marked by multiple milestones and firsts. You made a very successful transition from entertainment to politics. I think it would be safe to assume that there would have been many challenges along the way. Since we are talking about Nari Shakti, and frankly, you are an embodiment of that, I want to ask you, how did you manage to smash the proverbial glass ceiling and storm those male bastions?
So firstly, the very idea of a glass ceiling is an American one. It is not a global south concept at all. And I say this vehemently for 2-3 issues. When the US had this whole feminist movement and spoke about the glass ceiling that needs to be broken, if you look at it anthropologically and from a perspective of social science, India had already had milestones with regards to women and their status in society. Point in case, if you're somebody who's a fiend for research, pick up the Arthashastra. Now in India, we passed the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Bill in the year 2013. But the Arthashastra that was written thousands of years ago, in fact, has a documented evidence of what the administrator or the rulers should do if a woman at work is harassed, and especially by a public official. The challenge is that you never highlighted these aspects because these aspects never found political value. And that is when Prime Minister Modi speaks about Vikas and Virasat, that these issues become central. You have in your channel somebody who's very erudite and again, somebody who can give you a historical context of what Bharat is. Mr. Hemant Sharma is there sitting right on the front seat. He can explain to you, Chandragupta Maurya, his army had women fighting. You are the only nation that can historically evidence that in your fight for independence, you had a female ruler called Lakshmi Bai who went to war on a horse, tied her child to her back and raised arms against the British. Can you find any woman in battle with her baby tied to her back in any other war of independence anywhere in the world? You won't find it. So when Prime Minister Modi says Virasat bhi Vikas bhi, that is the one aspect I'd like to highlight. The second thing is that we do a great disservice to women when we keep them confined only to issues of women. We never ask men, what are you doing for men? And you're the embodiment of everything a man should be. We try and put the woman on that pedestal and say, oh, you are great and you are the inspiration. Why do we never have conversations about men being inspirations for other men as though we are supposed to carry the burden only of our gender? So the only way that you can complement women and their capacities is to ensure that you go beyond the pedestal talk and engage them on issues of why, I still remember budget day and every woman would be asked, "Aapka kitchen kaise impact hua hai?" As though the budget for defense doesn't matter for her. Is ensured that even when you look at gender budgeting across the government's outlays, we have seen an increment of 239% in how the government spends money across all sectors, including infrastructure, and then also computes in it the value for women. So I think we have to now shift the conversation. And that's why I think one of the most tectonic shifts in narrative is when Prime Minister says we need to now talk about women-led development. Because for too long we've been saying, Mahilaon ka vikas kar do, as though, I'm waiting for a handout. Yeah. So what Prime Minister Modi has done is say that if you want to develop as a nation, you can't afford to leave the women behind. Yeah. That is a much better conversation.
May I ask you a follow-up question? Actually, I'm really glad you talk about how the issue of women's empowerment, women's rights should not be confined to just women. And I'm reminded of what Prime Minister Narendra Modi said a few years ago in his Independence Day speech. लड़कियों को बहुत समझा लिया, लड़कियों को बहुत लेक्चर दे दिया, कहाँ जाती हो, कितने बजे घर आती हो. It is time you taught your boys how to behave with women and girls. It's time you asked them questions.
See, Neha, I don't think that beating up men ensures gender justice. I'm of the opinion that when we talk about...
But I'm saying this in the
when I'm
context of
talk-
women's safety.
No, the issue is that when there is domestic violence, there has to be somebody in the family who's a woman who knows that the lady is getting beaten up. So like I said, if you paint and taint every man as though they are the people we need to deal with, you will not create the social balance that we need. For instance, and why do I say this? Today, try and pass a legislation for reproductive rights of women in Europe and in the United States of America. You will get a pushback from polity and from people other than polity who presumably fill the intellectual space. In India, since 1960s, there has been a conversation about medical termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks. There have been those cases that the media has highlighted in the Supreme Court of India, where women have had to go to court saying, if I give birth to this baby, either the baby dies or I die. But there was no legislation. What Prime Minister Modi did was bring a legislation for medical termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks, passed it in both houses of parliament, and not a single Indian man spoke up against it. So the idea is, we've had a female Prime Minister before, but it is Prime Minister Modi who created the first ever menstrual hygiene protocol for administration to follow. And that is why I say that when you talk about the issues of women, don't discount the men. They are not the enemy.
मैम, ये सवाल यहाँ पर जितने भी लोग बैठे हैं उन सबके मन में होगा. स्मृति ईरानी जी की नारी शक्ति क्या है? आप घर भी मैनेज करती हैं, पार्टी का काम भी करती हैं, सरकार का भी काम करती हैं.
घर कैसे मैनेज करते हैं?
मैं वाकई में मैनेज नहीं करता हूँ. I really don't manage. It's my mom who does it.
The men never get asked this question, right?
Precisely.
I'm asking you, how do you, the multifaceted Smriti Irani.
Rajneesh was on the panel before me. Were you asked, how do you manage your home?
No, I'm saying, how do you manage so many things?
No. So, was he asked, how does he manage his home?
Sorry, Nishan, but I'm with her on this one.
Never mind.
No, even Rajneesh is with me on this one. Because he was asked questions purely on fintech. I wonder when will you ask me those questions?
Okay, I'm going to ask you for.
So the issue is that, now Nishan, why did I pick on this? And why did I say men are not the enemy? It is the psychology which is a challenge. The presumption for too long has been that men who are not educated, men who do not know better, men who do not have exposure to literature or to news or to intelligentsia will have an inherent bias against women. We need to recognize that there is an uncalled for but unrecognized bias that we all fight. And that seeps into conversation. And why do I not answer this question is I don't want to precipitate the bias. So if you start asking every man here, who looks after your baby? I will tell you who looks after mine.
मैम, एक विषय है जो अभी एक डेटा आया SBI का, उसमें लिखा कि अनपेड केयर, जिसको हम होम मेकर्स की भी बात करते हैं, वो भारत की इकोनॉमी में करीब 22 लाख करोड़ रुपए उसका मिनिमम अगर कंट्रीब्यूशन कहा जाए.
Again,
मैं आपसे समझना चाहूँगा, what is your take on it?
मैं भी समझना चाह रही हूँ कि which part of that house relationship is to be monetized. For instance, when you say that the work of a mother is unpaid for, the work of a wife is unpaid for. So if I am tough on my kids, and we have guests who are internationally, I think today, here amongst us, and that is why I use a vegetable which they may possibly recognize in a conversation. If my kid doesn't want to have broccoli, and I want that kid to have broccoli, does that make me a bad mother and I get paid less? How do you quantify carrying a child for 9 months looking after that child when the child is not able to walk, talk, feed itself, how do you compensate for bones that are broken just because of childbirth? Is there any economist in the world that can compute that cost to me? Secondly, as a wife, today, if I do not do what my husband desires, am I to be computed monetarily less? So, if you start monetizing relationships, then do you reduce women to just that token that is a service component in your life? And that is what nobody has been able to explain to me. What does a female somebody who just runs a family, as you normally say, what does just running a family mean? How do you compute it? And is my love for my child and my husband for sale? No, it's not. So when we talk about unpaid work for women at home, what do you mean? Nobody's been able to explain it yet. If you talk about women who work in, let's say, their own field for agriculture purposes, then you want to compute what her takeaway may have been if she was a day labor. Would you do the same for the man? So that is why it sounds very fanciful, because everybody in the global north has been trying to do it. But the issue is that what is the crux of our systems in families? It is mutual trust. It is mutual respect. Can you respect somebody that you need to pay to love and care?
Very well said, ma'am. Very well said.
And perhaps it's a problem of mindset more than anything else. The terms housewife, homemaker are often used, I think, in a derogatory fashion,
There's
not
nothing-
according the
No, no,
respect
I
that
don't
women
think-
deserve
no, no,
for the work
firstly,
they do.
I don't think women give a damn about whether you call them a housemaker or some ambitious lady. Women are not driven by those schisms. I genuinely believe that when you try to contextualize such conversation from an economic point of view, you better have something which is a solid economic perspective for policymakers to opine on. The development sector, which is your NGO ecosystem, works on a lot of contexts. But ultimately, for policymakers to make life easier for people, what do you need to do? I'll give you one example. Ayushman Bharat started, right? 10 crore families, 300 million Ayushman Bharat cards given out to citizens. How has it helped women? Now, cancer of the breast is something that not many people in our country spoke about openly. But there was a presumption that this is culturally not permissible as a topic of conversation. If you look at the numbers in Ayushman Bharat, women have personally gotten themselves screened for cancer of the breast and the cervix. 24 crore women. What does that mean? That they knew what the problem was, they knew where to get the help from, all they lacked was the resources. So who are these 24 crore women, the 240 million women who are landing up in medical institutions? So it was not a problem of the mindset ever. Who are these women? They are not from the elite. They are not from the educated Tier 1 cities. These are women who are the poorest of the poor. These are women who also belonged to villages. They walked up to a medical institution and said, this is my card. I need to get myself screened for breast cancer and cancer of the cervix. That's a huge cultural, I think, takeaway from Ayushman Bharat.
Yeah.
But if you look at numbers financially, and Rajneesh is better at all this than I am, but if you look at the numbers financially, Prime Minister Modi in the past 10 years has taken out 25 crore Indians, 250 million, if I'm right, out of multidimensional poverty. Now, health and the cost of health and out-of-pocket expenses, 130 million people are out of poverty because their health needs were covered by the Prime Minister's flagship scheme. So it is not now only about how do you service women, it is what is the overall budgetary impact on your system? What is the over social impact on your system? And why am I saying this? No other country in the world is running such a complex and such a large medical ecosystem. We are running it. Obamacare ran in a limited fashion, but it did not run in a country of 1.4 billion people. Ayushman is running in a country of 1.4 billion.
Right.
Another issue, your food grains to the doorstep of 800 million citizens for 2.5 years, that is an administrative miracle which is not happening anywhere in the world.
Given our numbers, most
Without
certainly.
disruption.
Yeah.
So that is why I said, what India does today, the world does
The world
tomorrow.
does tomorrow. But since we're talking about health, I think we need to touch on education as well. Very quickly, two-pronged question for you. Number one, we still have a huge challenge of a high dropout rate amongst girls in schools. Perhaps more
What are
needs
the
to be
numbers?
done. Sorry?
What are the numbers?
Okay, I don't have the data handy right now, but it continues
Because
to be a
I
challenge.
do, that's why I know that the numbers are curtailed and they've not gone up.
They've not gone up. But you'll agree it's a challenge. What more do we need to
One,
address it?
none of these challenges are topical to India. Two, the numbers of dropouts has decreased. In fact, when Prime Minister Modi took over in 2014, we recognized, and I had the privilege of being Minister Education then, we created the first ever national education policy by going to 2 lakh village education councils, by going to every district, every university, every school parent-teacher organization, by leveraging MyGov, by talking to not only state governments, but every other education minister who has ever served in the history of India, who is alive and who wanted to contribute, every political organization and international partners like UN Women, UNICEF, UNDP. That being said, one of the challenges, especially for women in higher education, today we have close to 263 million kids in K-12. We have around 36 to 38 million kids in higher education. What happens to women who used to not transition from grade 12 onwards to higher education? One of the biggest challenges was that they were not doing, say, things like PhD because they were moving cities either after marriage or for a job. The minute credits were made, given national movement, academic credits, that is when the numbers now of women who are doing PhDs in India has gone up by 99%. 43% of all STEM graduates in India are women. And Prime Minister Modi realized that one of the greatest challenges with regards to dropout is that when the girl enters the menstrual cycle age, they used to drop out for those issues because they didn't have access to toilets. So in the first year of him being Prime Minister, he built 400,000 toilets, marked and mapped. I was there because we did it, so I can say this with satisfaction. Mapped every toilet which was not available in every government school in collaboration with states. I think that's one of the greatest examples of cooperative federalism because not one state backed out. So we know that at every level of engagement, and that is when Prime Minister Modi had the education policy come out, for the first time in the history of independent India, it has a gender inclusion fund that helps fund infrastructure only for education of women and young girls.
मैम, इस शो को वाइंड अप करने से पहले आपसे एक सवाल पॉलिटिकल में ज़रूर पूछना चाहूँगा. एक तरफ हम लोग ये बात कर रहे हैं और दूसरी तरफ एक संदेश खाली जैसी घटना होती है जहां पर कार्रवाई भी नहीं हो रही है और चीज़ों को छुपाया जा रहा है. उस पर आपका टेक क्या है मैम?
यहाँ पे क्योंकि आपके अंतर्राष्ट्रीय बहुत सारे मेहमान बैठे हैं, मैं उनके सामने अपने देश के आंतरिक विषयों के ऊपर जो तीखापन आप मेरे लहजे में नॉर्मली देखते हैं, I'm very mindful of our international guests, and that is why I want to just say this. वहाँ जो हुआ, और मैं जानबूझकर हिंदी में ही कहूँगी, वहाँ जो हुआ वो भारतीय तो क्या किसी भी इंसान की सोच के परे है. मैंने ये पश्चिम बंगाल में जब हिंसा हुई थी चुनाव के बाद तब कहा था कि शायद मीडिया में भी इस प्रकार का एहसास है कि अगर भाजपाई है तो उसे मौत के घाट आसानी से उतारा जा सकता है. अगर भाजपा की महिला कार्यकर्ता है उसको उसके घर से उठाकर सामूहिक बलात्कार किया जा सकता है. अगर भाजपा का युवा मोर्चा का कोई कार्यकर्ता है तो उसे गांव में खुले खेत में पेड़ से रस्सी से टांग कर मारा जा सकता है। अगर भाजपा का कोई वरिष्ठ कार्यकर्ता है तो उसके घर को आग लगाई जा सकती है। एज दो चूंकि हम भाजपा से हैं इसलिए पश्चिम बंगाल में हमें कोई मौत के घाट उतार दे तो किसी को कोई फ़र्क नहीं पड़ना चाहिए, क्योंकि ये हमारी पॉलिटिकल कॉस्ट है जो हम देते हैं लड़ने के लिए। संदेश खाली में वो हैं जो भाजपाई नहीं हैं। They came for us first. They are coming for their own now. आप सोच सकते हैं कि जिन लोगों ने ममता जी को वर्षों वर्ष तक सहयोग दिया, सहायता दी, उन औरतों को घरों से उठा उठा कर बलात्कार किया जाता है। क्या ये कोई सोच सकता था कि ममता बंदोपाध्याय को पता ही नहीं है कि हाउस टू हाउस औरतों को उनकी उम्र, उनके धर्म के आधार पर चिन्हित करके उठाया जा रहा था। और इसलिए मैंने कहा दे केम फॉर अस फर्स्ट, दे आर कमिंग फॉर यू नाउ। और निशान जी, स्तब्ध करने वाली बात यह है, राजनीति अपनी तरफ, कांग्रेस के कार्यकर्ताओं की भी हत्या हुई। कांग्रेस के लोग भी वहाँ जाकर बात करना चाहते हैं, लेकिन वो शहजादे जो अभी भी राजनीति के भूल भुलैया में खुद को खोज रहे हैं, उनके पास इस विषय के लिए एक शब्द नहीं है।
Okay, ma'am, I know this is a very, very serious subject, but since
I
we're
am
running
not
out of...
deliberately speaking on this subject in English because we have international guests, and I'm very mindful that in front of international guests, I will not talk about domestic political agendas.
We appreciate that. But can I just ask you a question in a lighter vein, since we are wrapping up this conversation?
Sure.
You recently posted a picture of your father with the Prime Minister, and the caption read, "When the boss meets the father and you pray, they don't exchange complaints about you. Parent-teacher meeting चल रही है." तो मैं आपसे ये पूछना चाहती हूँ कि वो पेरेंट टीचर मीटिंग कैसी रही, टीचर ने पेरेंट को रिपोर्ट कार्ड कैसी दी?
My father is habituated to me getting him in trouble. I still remember as a kid, between my parents, they used to do a coin toss to say, आज स्मृति की रिपोर्ट कार्ड लेने कौन जाएगा? I think this is the first time that my father was happy to be in attendance to meet with my teacher. The fact that you can even be a student in Prime Minister Modi's class is a great privilege, Neha. I'm 47 years of age, and I have lived to witness history and a legend at work myself. I have witnessed a man standing there in Parliament ensuring Article 370 is revoked. I have witnessed 33% reservation for women passed in both houses of Parliament. I have witnessed Ram Lalla Virajman. I've been a part of history, and I've been with a legend who has made history. What more? Even if the fact pass है कि fail है नहीं पता, report card पे मोदी का sign है, वही उस report card को अमूल्य बना.
We are sure it's an A grade. We are pretty sure of that. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the one and only Miss Smriti Irani.
Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you, ma'am. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, Neha and Nishant, for conducting that riveting session nonetheless. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't keep the applause coming. Union Minister Srimati Smriti Irani.